Still want to dissolve the town?
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Rye-Town Park Commission meeting of November 15th, 2016. Please rise as Laura Brett leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we do the roll call, we have a lot of new faces up here tonight. Terry McCartney is sitting in for Julie Killian. Laura Brett is sitting in for Mayor Sack. And Lindsay Jackson is sitting in for Benny Salinitro. So I guess I've called half the roll. Go ahead. Go ahead, Debbie.
Commissioner Killian,
Terry McCartney for Commissioner Killian.
Commissioner Dennis Pilla,
Here?
Commissioner Joe Sack,
Laura Brett here for Commissioner Sack.
Commissioner Benedict Salinitro,
Lindsay Jackson here for Commissioner Salinitra.
Commissioner Paul Rosenberg,
Here.
President Gary Zuckerman.
Here. Thank you. We have adoption of minutes, and unfortunately, I do not believe we have a quorum, have 4 people who have either been at the last 3 meetings or have viewed it on television. Is that correct? If that is correct, then,
That shouldn't be an issue anyway.
Yeah, you don't have to be there to do the minutes.
well, usually we like people to do that. Is there any objection? Has everybody read the minutes? Is there any objection to us asking for a motion and second to pass all 3 sets of minutes? If not, then I'm going to ask for a motion and second to pass all 3 sets of minutes.
So moved.
Second?
Call the roll, please.
Acting Commissioner Brett,
Yes.
Commissioner Pilla,
Yes.
Acting Commissioner McCartney,
Yes.
Acting Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenberg,
Yes.
President Zuckerman.
Yes, thank you. Public comment on non-agenda items, please. Any member of the public who wishes to speak on an item not on the agenda, please step forward and state your name and address. Yes?
Good evening. My name is Linda Wells. I'm part of Friends of Rye-Town Park, but a resident of Rye as well. As you may or may not know, Friends, in combination with the park itself and the commission, has just planted 12 new saplings in the park. And it's an effort to keep the reforestation going, to supplement the trees that are just reaching the end of their natural life cycle. We have a little bit of an issue with the weather conditions, and I have a proposal to make. It's really imperative that these new trees have water sources for the first month. And today's really the first rain we've had since they were planted. And I wondered, in the absence of park staff, if there might be a way for one of the municipalities in the town of Rye to water these 12 trees once a week for the next 3 weeks. That's the extent of the commitment.
No. I think that the obvious choice is the city of Rye.
I'd be happy to volunteer our DPW to do that, ma'am.
Okay, that'd be great. We could have maybe, I don't know, lawyer might like to coordinate that since he's in the park far more than our board members are. And that would be great. That would give them a fighting chance to survive.
Okay. Commissioner Rosenberg
Thank
has
you,
a comment.
Gary. Why don't we just get those gator bags?
Some of them have the gator bags, but the gator bags need to be filled.
Oh.
So nature doesn't fill them. They have to be done
I thought they
manually.
lasted for more than a week, though.
Well, I understand, I was not
No.
involved in the actual planting, but
okay.
only some have bladders, so.
Okay.
But just a good soak once a week would do it.
Okay.
Great.
Good.
Thank you, City of Rye.
Sure.
Yes, thank you very much.
And thank you, Friends of Rye-Town Park, actually, for the saplings. Sorry to interrupt.
Listen, I feel your pain because I just have a gardener who put in a whole lot of flowers and trees, and they told me you gotta water it now It has been very dry.
Usually this time of year, it's not so much an issue, but we haven't had much condensation, no rainfall to speak of, so that's great, thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
I know you have a lot to talk about, so I'll just quickly ask, what's the situation with the seawall? And I ask that as an individual because I heard discussion of that at the Rye City Council meeting, which seemed a little bit opposed to what had been talked about here in terms of who's delaying the project and getting the wall fixed.
Linda, I don't know what happened at the Rye City Council meeting, and I would not want to ascribe blame to anybody. The status with the Rye Town Park Commission is that we have applied for an extension of time to do the work. Our engineer, Dolph Rotfeld, is working on it. In addition, we have a resolution proposed this evening to select Beth Evans as our environmental consultant because we need to get DEC permits for both the seawall and the ramp when that comes to fruition. So it is moving forward. And I know that there's been some delay. There has been a lapse, but the status, as far as I know, is that we have made application, the paperwork is done, and we're waiting to hear back from FEMA.
Okay. Keep pushing. And then the other thing was the ramp, just to say, in light of declared revenues from this past season that didn't exist before to put towards a project like the ramp, I just wonder if there's any plan. I think that probably will dovetail with what's being discussed later on this evening, but if there's money available, which had not been available before, that's kind of been the stopping point in getting this ramp done. From a safety issue, I think it's something that needs to be addressed.
Linda, you're absolutely right. And I think we're going to be addressing the question of the ramp again when we do our budget for 2017, which I hope to have a draft for at our next monthly meeting. And, hopefully, just as an advisory, at the end of 2015, the city of Rye and the town of Rye had agreed to fund capital work with because there was no operating deficit, if you'll recall. And I believe, Laura, you recall that very well.
Yes,
And was proud to
The-
tell us. Yeah, that was good for
The
you.
town of Rye has already sent a check to the commission, which the commission has deposited for its share of the capital pursuant to that informal agreement. And I believe Debbie has been in contact with Marcus Serrano of the city of Rye to ascertain those funds. And hopefully that will give us another $100,000 or so, contingent, of course, on what happens budgetarily and
Sure.
whether we have operating funds sufficient for next year.
Okay, but it's still at the top of the list, or
It
close
is-
to it.
It is on the list, and that's one reason why we are talking about hiring the environmental consultant. So, because we can't do any work without the permitting process.
Right.
And if you will recall, we also have a study, which we haven't heard back yet on, the CFA grant for planning. And hopefully, we won't need to use all of commission funds for the ramp, and we might be able to, at some point, get state grant money for that. That's our hope.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Thanks, Linda.
Would anybody else like to speak on matters not on the agenda? If not, the park management report?
Oh, the capstone team.
Pardon me, hold it, I skipped that. And that's the biggest item on the agenda, the capstone presentation. Please, step forward.
Yes.
Debbie, do you want to do a short introductory as to,
Sure, yeah, it's, we're one of few
Or do you want a wireless mic? Do you have, Tom? Huh? No? Yeah.
So while Tom is getting our presenters set up, I wanted to introduce, help me with your last names, please. Chelsea Brandon and Barbara Ioannidis, who are two members of a four-person team from NYU Wagner Graduate School of Public Service, my alma mater, who are studying urban planning and public service. These ladies and their team have selected a project that we proposed, and will be working as our consultants from now until they graduate in May. This is their first presentation to the Rytown Park Commission, in which they will be explaining the work that they are planning to do. And the scope of work is included in the packet that was posted on the web. So if you're interested in reading further, the information is there in the packet. We also have there were a couple of copies of the agenda. So, ladies.
Welcome.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. So these are the topics we want to discuss tonight. We're first going to give an introduction of our team and the Capstone project. We're going to talk about drivers and objectives. The third thing we will speak about are key challenges in the project. We'll talk about methodology and the final product, what we will deliver. And we want to open it up to questions towards the end of our presentation. So my name is Chelsea Brandon. I want to give you a little bit of some background. I am studying urban planning at NYU Wagner. My concentration is in environment, infrastructure, and transportation. I am a second-year student, and I work as an intern now for an organization called the Community Preservation Corporation. And I'm going to pass it over to Barbara.
CPC.
I'm Barbara Ioannidis. I am a third-year part-time student at NYU, finishing my master's this year in urban planning with a focus on environment, infrastructure, and transportation as well. I did not have a background in urban planning with my undergraduate degree, but I've gotten over 5.5 years of experience working in real estate development, and previously I worked for the city's Economic Development Corporation in their asset management division, and I currently work for a real estate investment trust called Seritage Growth Properties. Our two other team members who can't be here tonight are Colin Murphy, who's a Westchester native of Chappaqua, and he has a focus on housing and economic development, and Jenny O'Connell, who has a background in transportation planning. And our faculty advisor is Michael Keene, who we're very excited to have as our advisor. He previously worked on the master plan for Port Chester, so he's a really good resource for us to tap into.
So I want to talk about what is Capstone. Capstone provides students with both a critical learning experience and an opportunity to perform a public service. Capstone teams spend...
Excuse me, Chelsea, hold on. Tom, can we turn the lights down a little bit? Okay, Debbie, can we turn the lights down a little bit?
Great, perfect.
Thank you.
So Capstone teams spend an academic year addressing challenges and identifying opportunities for clients in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. The town of Rye, as Debbie mentioned, they submitted a proposal to NYU Wagner, recognizing an opportunity to study and address issues related to increased use of Rytown Park. With all users and stakeholders in mind, Rytown Park seeks to answer the following question. How do we, the park, steward and maximize access to this social good while working to protect it?
As Chelsea mentioned, Debbie and the Rytown Park Commission, they kind of identified this gap that was trying to maximize all of the stakeholders and what their plans and visions for the park are, with keeping the resources available to the public, and basically are looking for a vision and establishing a mission for the park. And they put in their proposal these 7 objectives, which are on the wall. And our year-long project is to identify kind of who the stakeholders are, what are their visions, what strategies are there to maximize access to the social good that the park provides, from passive interaction with the stakeholders, and also minimizing environmental degradation, making recommendations as to how to balance this mission with its suburban location. And for us, this is something we're excited about because we are looking to expand our knowledge of planning and what it means beyond just a high-density urban environment. Diversifying the budget to provide stable financial planning beyond existing revenue streams, determining how historical structures factor into the long-term plan and finances, exploring opportunities in structure of the Rytown Park Commission to accomplish these planning goals, and finally, defining metrics to guide and measure operations and management, and developing a framework for measuring success.
So these are a list. This is a list of some of the key challenges we expect to face. So right now, programming in the park, it is limited due to weather. There are a lot of programming that we'd like to expand to all seasons. There's also historic designation of the historical buildings, which could pose some challenges for us, and accessibility in terms of ADA, and just keeping the park, making sure that it's open.
Sorry, and with that, with accessibility, we've done a number of site visits now, and it is a goal that we've heard from several of the people that we've been able to visit the park with about accessibility and bringing the building up to ADA compliance, and also accessibility in terms of the reach of the park and who comes to the park, who are the stakeholders, who are the permit holders, and that in its definition of accessibility goes beyond just the ADA. It's a very kind of broad, encompassing, I guess, component that we're going to be focusing to narrow down on the with this project. So, and with historic designation, I believe all of the buildings, right, most of the buildings are historically.
The entire facility
Yeah.
is on the list.
Yeah, so they're all on the list, and there's a challenge there as to how can we keep that designation relevant, and what are we able to do with any federal funding that comes in with that. And it's really an interesting area to explore because it's got all these nuances that have to be followed, but require innovation at the same time.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything.
Okay, next on park volume capacity. We've heard that every year more and more visitors come to the park, and with that come more cars. And there is a need to identify how to kind of handle the increased parking issues with increased visitor capacity, and how to make everyone have a great time at the park while keeping the beach clean and enjoyable, and the grassy lawn areas clean and safe and available. And I think that with growing number of residency in the area, that this is something that we have to focus on as well. Do you want to talk about environmental?
Yeah, this also, so with increasing capacity, which is something we want to look into, there are more and more environmental impact issues that we might face. That's really it. Should I talk about the stakeholders? Okay, so another challenge that we might face is that there are a lot of stakeholders and interest groups and users of the park, and we want to make sure that we're hearing all of them and listening to what they have to say, and understand what they want for the future of Rytown Park. Okay, so methodology and research. So like I said, stakeholder and community engagement is going to be really important for our planning process. We've been working on getting contact information for point people and different stakeholder groups, and we are now working on creating a survey, which you might see in the near future that will be sent around in early January. We want to keep things transparent and understand all the users and what they want, pretty much, for the park. So outreach, we want to include public meetings, interviews with the interest groups, surveys, phone calls, and we want to organize a community workshop to get all of the stakeholders together. And some other research we're going to do is a SWOT analysis, which enables us to develop full awareness of all strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So that's the acronym SWOT.
A big component of our research focuses on existing conditions, and with that we'll be using census data, any information that currently exists on park usage, just by number of park visitors, existing programming, and that sort of stuff, observations that we make on our site visits, and also any background reports. We've gotten a number of the park management reports, which we'll be able to go through and see what's really been brought up in minutes from previous commission meetings, so we can see if there are any trends as to what is of concern to the stakeholders of the park. And I think that's going to be a big focus as well. Case studies will include research on comparable parks. We're going to start with researching parks in the tri-state area and then kind of expand to see what do parks in other communities do that maybe Rytown Park doesn't already have or do in terms of programming and their revenue stream, and that's going to be able to help us build our recommendations. And if there's any existing framework for success, I think a lot of planning is not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but making it better. And then finally, we'll look at environmental and sustainability measures, which will focus on how do we protect these natural resources and, you know, any future plantings that these stakeholder groups are contributing to, and how do we use these resources now without putting them at risk for future generations' use of the park.
So the final product, what we want to come up with, we want to produce a report that consists of the following 5 sections. So on the presentation it has 4, but we actually have 5. I'm sorry about that. We want to create a report that has the full existing conditions of the park, stakeholder identification and collective vision, a SWOT analysis, relevant case studies, and recommendations and implementation studies. And we will be presenting our final presentation to the Rytown Park Commission in May 2017. So look for us then.
And in the meantime, for all of our stakeholder outreach. Louder. Yeah, and not just, don't look for us just for May 2017, also in the meantime, as we try to reach out to all the stakeholders and hear what everyone has to say. So it's going to be an active and engaging process between the Capstone Group and the community. And if you have any questions that you don't have time to ask us tonight or think about later on, we have a email address. It's teamsoundview.rtp@gmail.com, and it's accessible by all of our team members to review and get back to you. And we're available to come up to any of the, Rytown areas, the town of Rye, Portchester, Rybrook. There are a lot of you. So please, we are really counting on engaging with you all, and we hope to hear from you.
Thank you very, very much. That was an indication of quite an extensive report that you're going to be coming up with, and a lot of work is going to go into this, I could see. It almost sounds like you don't have enough time to do all of this. It sounds like it's going to be a great project for you and a great project for the people of Rybrook, Portchester, Rye City, and Rye Neck,
Yes, all four of them.
right? I know that must be very difficult for people coming from the city. Yes, New York City, we have 5 boroughs, and, you know, what are all these towns and villages and cities up there, right? You learn it quickly enough. Comments from the commission, please.
I have my big thing, I guess, is, I know Linda's been complaining about the lack of rain recently, but unfortunately, weather patterns have changed, and, you know, with Sandy, the park and the whole area got hit pretty hard. A few years before that with Irene, I don't recall, but we are getting these stronger storms. Have you guys been looking into sort of projects that would be more weather resistant?
I think as we continue to conduct our research, there's definitely a resiliency component to that beyond just planning for 15, 20 years from now, but also immediate future and natural disasters and other immediate threats that climate change poses on the park. So it is something that we are looking to add to in our recommendations.
Okay, because, you know, there's a historical component where the buildings are gorgeous and they're historical, but yet we want to make sure whatever we do will withstand anything major.
I have a quick question. How do you intend to gather the input and do your surveys and things like that to get this feedback from the public at large and not necessarily just the governmental people?
So we're trying to leverage all of our resources, and we've been able to get a lot of the information for current and past permit holders, and we will be conducting a survey electronically that will kind of put a mass mailing out to in early January with links to the survey that way, and kind of give them a window of time that and our contact info for them to fill that out in. And in addition, Chelsea is kind of spearheading our efforts to meet with more of the stakeholder groups like Friends of Rytown Park Alliance, and other more kind of formal and informal groups. We have kind of the contact info now for point people, and we're trying to set up meetings in the spring for like after the holidays for one in each of the 4 areas, like geographic areas,
Right.
if not a minimum of 2, if not all 4.
All right.
Do you have
Mr.
Dennis.
First of all, I want to welcome you ladies to Rydetown, and actually specifically Portchester here, if it's a little confusing. And thank you for
It's
selecting.
only confusing to me.
Are you
Everyone
guys
else on my
from New
team
York
gets
City?
it.
Where are you from, actually, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm from Baltimore.
Oh, cool. And how about you, Chelsea?
I'm from Miami, Florida.
And do you work with Sadie McEwen at CPC?
Yes, I
Sadie's a
do.
great lady. Tell her Mayor Pillis said hello, please.
I
And
will.
excuse my non-mayoral look. But I want to thank you for selecting this project in our park. And thank you for your career focus on public service, actually, which I think is a noble profession. I have just a couple questions. I think this is really important, and I'm particularly interested in the future visioning. So is this going to end up being like a master plan where we have a current situation assessment, physically, who the stakeholders are, the vision of what they want it to be, and then your best practice and recommendations on how to get there? Am I oversimplifying it enough?
Well, I think a key thing is that master plans are adopted, and it's a very legislative process,
Okay,
right?
well, yeah, from
let's-
municipal
Yeah,
master
I
plan. No, but a
wanna,
park master plan I'm talking about more.
Yeah.
Exactly what it sounds
Yeah,
Well, I think that's what we're envisioning for the final
yeah.
product. I think that's what our group's been envisioning, sort of a master plan that addresses all of the
Like a mini
challenges.
master plan, yeah.
Yeah. So
Kind of like best practices and.
I think it's gonna be more than just a master plan. I think it's gonna have
Yeah, no, it's very
components in it
exciting.
that are.
It's super duper exciting. I like the approach, and I want to thank Debbie actually for the hard work that she put in, and your Heidi. So here's the question I have. So this is a project that started already, and it's going to go to May, and you have different activities and phases. We're going to be talking in a couple of moments about a restaurant component that we have there, which right now is a public-private partnership, and about how we're going to rebid a request for proposal to see if we could solicit, a variety of interest in what they want that to be. How can we thread our process to develop an RFP to be woven in with your project, such that once we have the public input on what our community wants the park to be, we can kind of fold that into this request for proposal to go out there to the restaurant community? Does that make sense, and do you think we can weave it together?
I understand, I think it makes sense.
And
I
we may
think
need to
the
have an offline.
timelines might be a little difficult to make them kind of weave together at this point, but I think depending on the results of the RFP, there will definitely be an opportunity to bring the two projects together and see if, I'm not entirely sure how long the restaurant RFP will be for, or if there's a way to kind of revisit it or take into account this product.
And maybe we can
Yeah.
have an offline conversation with Debbie and the supervisor to kind of fill you in on all these details. But I think it'd be very, very helpful to us it would be to leverage whatever input you guys can gather early on, right? Because you're doing that upfront, it sounds. And if we can, use that input to take offline, if you will, to spin off on what we want the restaurant specifically to be, that would be cool.
May I follow up on that?
Please, it's your meeting.
I don't think that it would be the function of the Capstone Group to do what would be akin to an RFP, but
No, no.
maybe in the course of your surveying, as part of your survey questions, you could survey the interest groups as to what kind of a restaurant that they would prefer to see. Unless you saw our meetings, a lot of the questioning about the restaurant revolved around, should it be year-round, should it be not, should it be, an adjunct to the beach, should it be more of a destination? And a lot of people have made a lot of claims, but a survey has never been done. So that may be part of what you survey. I'm only suggesting. Laura.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm very excited about this project. I'm filling in today, but I've been on the Rydtown Park Commission I was on the Rydtown Park Commission for about 3 years. I wanted to share with you some of my experience over my 3 years on the Park Commission. And that is that this is really an exciting time for the park, where I think it is going to be the job of this commission to try and envision what the next few years look like, because in the last few years, we've done some really great things in making sure that the park is on sound financial footing and engaging new user groups in the park, so that I think we're seeing the park benefit from a lot of good management over the last few years. One of the things that has always been a priority for the commission, or it has been a priority for the commission over the last few years, has been to bring more residents into the park. So the user groups that you're going to meet with are definitely going to be people who are residents of the 4 towns that manage the park. But when you go and look at the visitorship day to day, especially in the summer months, you're very often seeing people who come from far away. So I hope that you share the commission's goal of getting the local residents to use the park more, and that's just something I really wanted to underscore right here.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's very helpful, and we understand how important that is, and that's why we're hoping that if we're able to get that input from the residents who are part of these stakeholder groups, that if they start to see more of what they want for the park, they'll start to engage and visit more often.
Question.
Sure.
So when can we expect to hear from you guys next?
So we're hoping to send out our postcard with all the survey information first week of January, and we, between now and then, are going to start reaching out to the point people of the stakeholder groups, so that we can start scheduling those more informal meetings face-to-face for early next year.
And
I'd like to add to that we have developed a system of information feedback with the Capstone team. We have a conference call set up for every other Thursday morning at 9 a.m., in case you want to jump on. And the team will be providing us with a written status report that will be in your packets. That format. If you have any suggestions for a change of format, we're wide open. But that's
Looks great.
so you will be hearing from them in writing, if not in person.
Thank you.
Bravo.
You mentioned sending out postcards. What universe are you going to be sending them out to? Are you going to be doing specifically the groups that are involved and their members? Are you going to be looking further into the community?
I think we're going to start with the list of current and past permit holders and their addresses, and also if there are any additional suggestions by the stakeholder groups when we meet with them face to face. But we're starting with permit holders.
Okay, because I think, one of the things to getting community involvement is maybe reaching out to some of the local residents, and I know it would be a huge undertaking, but some of the local residents, I don't know if you do, pick out of a hat even, to get their input, people who don't use it, why don't you use it?
We had
And what would
spoken-
attract you?
I'm sorry to interrupt. We had spoken, I know, when we were putting this together about having, and you guys mentioned it, public participation sessions in each of the communities so that we could kind of advertise it and, because the problem is the park is in Rye City and here we are in Portchester, right? Or he's even further away in Rybrook. So, yeah, doing it in those communities, that would be a great way, I think, to get people who maybe aren't as engaged, but that's the opportunity, right?
And, I'm there every day with my dog. And I think it's just a wonderful place, even in the winter. So that's
It
a
is.
big thing. If we could figure out a way to use it, someone even said an ice skating rink, but I don't think the weather would suffice this year.
Don't forget about the dog user group.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
I was
the-
just
Right.
going to
the
suggest
city of
that.
Rye, and the city of Rye will have a list of dog permit holders, so you may be able to reach out
That's
to
a
those people
great idea.
individually.
That is a great
Excellent.
idea. I had the distribution list that I gave to the team specifically referred to who I knew to be a dog walker, but the permit is
Right.
the best idea. That's great.
That's excellent. Excellent. Terry, anything from you?
No, that's it.
Does anybody in the audience wish to speak about this project? Yes, ma'am.
Jamie Jensen, 588 Forest. I live across the street from the park. Come over and have coffee. I co-founded Rytown Park Alliance with Russ Gold, so you have my face now and my email.
Oh,
And
great.
don't hesitate.
Oh, perfect. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jamie. Anybody else? If not, then thank you very, very much.
Thank you very
It's
much.
much appreciated.
great. Luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us tonight.
Now the park management report. Read that first because I'm mine. Terry,
Hello,
hi.
how are you? Again, I want to thank the commission for the opportunity to run the park this year. We're now into the off-season, and we're still getting lots of people there walking, running, and believe it or not, people sunbathing on the beach. Just to give you an update of what has been going on for the last month, as of the 14th, the water in the park, except for our main bathrooms, has been shut off. All our postseason work in all departments is complete. We still do have 2 maintenance workers there. They are painting all our interior offices, and I have to report they absolutely look great. They will be there till the 25th. The bathrooms in the main beach gate are open daily, and on November 27th, we're going to be closing them, and they will remain closed. GPS, I've been constantly, monitoring their contract at the park, and they have been continuing to do our fall cleanup and the maintenance of the lawn on a weekly basis. John Dickett is contracted to do all the garbage and deal with issues at the park for the off-season. Linda said about the 12 new trees that were planted. And security, we do still have one security guard day and night, and their last day will be November 27th. Other than a few problems with dogs off leash during the day and some people deciding they wanted to nail advertisements on the trees at the park, there have not been any incidents to report so far in the off-season. As far as finances, we're working, I've been working with the M Group, preparing the preliminary budget for next season. I've been working with Sullivan Data, putting together plans for the installation of our new network Wi-Fi, and we are also going to do a network-based phone system. I'm beginning to do some research on POS support companies, looking to see if there's something bigger and better out there than what we have. And I've also been...
POS means point of sale.
Point of sale, I'm sorry. And research on automation and new camera software and new cameras to be put in at the park. Programs that are still going on, Stroller Fit is on Mondays and Fridays through the 21st. This coming Saturday, we have the MSG Ranger Run through the park, and on the 26th, the City of Rye Turkey Run. And we're working with those organizations to make sure that, we have staff on hand and everything goes smoothly. The first off-season beach cleanup was held this past Saturday. Thanks to Bill and Russ, they put together a team of volunteers, and they had about 17 or so people show up, and they collected lots of garbage and had a great time doing it. As far as park development, we are going to be raffling off a Platinum Family Season Permit with the Chamber of Commerce, Portchester, Rybrook, and the City of Rye. We have a family who's donating money to purchase a dogwood tree. And Bill and I have sat down and we're starting to look at events for the upcoming season and hoping to get more events going on. Pavilion rentals, we're getting calls for booking the pavilions so far for the upcoming year, and our website is currently up to date.
Thank you, Terry.
No problem.
Great. I just wanted to fold in the financial report. We're not going to have a formal financial report this month. As Terry mentioned, our accounting team is working up the budget. But the numbers for October are, thus far for it was 1.15 million in revenue, expenses 873,000. So our surplus through October was $281,162, which is about $100,000 more than last year. And it's still, the surplus will continue to go down since the end of the season. And I mentioned this last month, we still continue to have expenses. We don't have any more income coming in. However, as Terry mentioned, we're paying wages for security, for maintenance, for payroll taxes, the maintenance contracts for leaf removal, et cetera, maintenance supplies, and insurance. So those continue. So that will eat away a little bit at the surplus. But right now, through October, it's over $280,000, which is really good. So anyway, and with that, we'll move on to the next item. A resolution to engage environmental consultant Beth Evans. I alluded to this before. We have permits that need to be obtained with relation to both the seawall and the ramp. Dolph Rotfeld is our engineer, and we are proposing to engage Beth Evans as our environmental consultant. Many of you are aware of her credentials. Her proposed proposal is attached to the resolution, and There's a fee schedule attached, and the amount is not to exceed $6,000. Any amount above $6,000 must receive prior approval from the Rye Town Park Commission. I'm reading for the resolution. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion on this? If not, please call the roll.
Acting Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Pilla,
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenberg.
Yes.
Acting Commissioner Brett,
Yes.
Acting Commissioner McCartan,
Yes.
President Zuckerman.
Yes, thank you. Next item is a discussion of the selection of a consultant for our restaurant RFP. At our last meeting, I believe, we decided that the RFP process going forward would involve a consultant. The progress that we have made on that is we have compiled a list from various sources, many, I would suggest, from within the city of Rye, some of whom have, for example, worked on the Whitby Castle RFP, and other consultants. Debbie has, I hate to use the word investigated, has reviewed, and I believe we have a list of 5 or 6. I have drafted a letter requesting qualifications, et cetera, that I've sent to the commission for review, and that will be going out this week to those consultants. The commissioners have discussed this. We discussed it somewhat at our special meeting, and the way the consultant will be chosen will be a subcommittee of the commission. 2 commissioners volunteered, Julie Killian and Dennis Pilla. And in addition, we will be choosing 2 members of the public, one from the city of Rye and one from the town of Rye, to act as our screening committee. And that's how the consultant will be chosen, and then the consultant will obviously prepare the RFP. So, comments from the commission?
Pretty straightforward.
Okay, very good, thank you. The next item is a discussion regarding a short-term license extension for the current restaurant, Seaside Johnny's. There has been much discussion about this matter. It's appeared in the papers recently. In fact, 2 newspapers I know ran stories about it. There are some members of the commission who felt that there should be a 2-year extension. Other members felt that there should be a 1-year extension. There have been substantial negotiations with the current owner, and we are trying to achieve a compromise that will be palatable to all. And I think, Mr. Rosenberg, I will give you the floor on this.
Thank you. I had submitted to this commission and the acting commissioners this morning an email that talked about what I thought was a compromise negotiation strategy, whereby we would offer the current lessee a year with the option to renew. And if we did not, and the option to renew would be mutual, so they would need to request it if they wanted to, and then we would need to approve the option to renew. If for some reason this commission did not renew it, then this commission would refund 25% of the 2017 fee that the applicant would have been subject to. I didn't hear anything back. I did speak with Commissioner Killian late last night. She seemed to be in favor of it. Spoke with Chairman Zuckerman this morning. He seemed to be in favor of it. I didn't hear from anybody else. But if we fast forward, Chairman Zuckerman spoke with the applicant who wasn't in favor of it, it seems.
I did speak with Mr. Ambrose, and, I don't want to put words in his mouth. I know he's sitting in the audience. And I'd rather not negotiate in public. I think it's a fair compromise offer. I know that Mr. Ambrose, by the way, the commission is limited, unless we get state legislation, to 3 years. We cannot offer a license in excess of 3 years. None of the commissioners expressed an interest in a 3-year extension. Some of the commissioners wanted a 1-year extension. The obvious compromise, I thought, would be a 2-year extension. And, but there seems not to be a majority for that, and so Mr. Rosenberg came up with this further compromise. And I think he would like to put that to a vote.
Yeah, I wanted to make a motion that we, and we obviously don't have a formal resolution in front of us. Oh, you did?
I did not get it. Sorry.
Did you bring a hard copy? Did you bring hard copies?
Well, we could read it.
Yeah,
You
well,
could
Paul
read
can read it out.
Paul can read it out loud.
Laura, I saw your hand up. Did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to report that I apologize for not getting back to you on this.
That's okay.
But I did in fact talk to Mayor Sack and found that he supports this, and so I'd be prepared to support this resolution as well.
And the same with Julie Killian.
Great.
Do you want me to read it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Whereas the license agreement with Starfish Grill, Inc. expires 12/31/16, and whereas the Wright-Town Park Commission would like to extend the lease, be it resolved that the Wright-Town Park Commission will grant a 1-year extension of the license agreement at no increase in rent with a mutual option to renew for the 2018 season. Starfish Grill must notify the commission no later than 10/1/17 of its desire to renew the agreement for the 2018 season. The commission shall have 30 days to act on the request. In the event the commission declines the option to renew, Starfish Grill will be refunded 25% of the rent paid in 2017. If the commission fails to act on the request to renew within 30 days, the renewal will be automatically granted.
Thank you. Motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Further discussion?
Discussion?
Dennis.
2 questions, or 1 comment and 1 question. One, we may want to make 30 days, 45 days, since our meeting schedule, you'd probably have to get us together. That's a nit. That's a nit. But financially, so the rent totals what, about 100 grand a year?
Roughly.
So
Approximately.
25,000 would be the.
Give back.
Wow. Personally, I think this will likely take longer than a year. If you caught the thread of what I was talking about with Chelsea and Barbara, it would be wonderful, I think, if we can, like, the year is over, right? It's November, it's the end of November, next week is Thanksgiving. It would be wonderful, though, if we could start off 2017 getting community input, among other things, about what they want the park to be, about this restaurant space, and then use that as an ingredient into the restaurant RFP. So that brings us, I'm thinking that March, April kind of a thing. A selection by June. Part of the problem why we're here is because we didn't give a lot of time for alternate bidders to realistically come up with something and to be able to fabricate or make whatever improvements. So we found that time was the enemy when we did it the last time. All that said, I think this may take more than a year. And I guess the key question here, and I agree with the town supervisor that we don't want to negotiate in public. But, I think we just have to be realistic about that. And, the 25 is if we don't renew for the
Correct.
second year, so it's kind of like a hedge. I
Dennis,
get it.
I feel the same way you do. I
Yeah.
know that some members of the commission believe that we are going to be able to get an RFP issued and a winner chosen in sufficient time that there would only be a 1-year extension. However, my belief is that it's going to take longer than that. The reason is, A, we're going to need state legislation, and I do not believe that we should actually issue an RFP until we have the state legislation in hand, because I think it's unfair for a bidder to bid on something when we do not have the power to grant
Yeah, we may not
that
be able to.
license.
So that won't be probably
So-
until June.
So that would take us further out.
And it's New York
Secondly,
State
and I
legislator.
keep in mind something that one of our residents said at the last meeting. There are many restaurants that plan 2 and 3 years ahead of time. And therefore, to put out an RFP for the 2018 season may not be as practical as the 2019 season. And I would suggest that the restaurant consultant would advise us, and possibly it would go out as an RFP for either the 2018 or 2019. We may get fabulous bidders for 2019 and only 2 for 2018. I don't know. So my suggestion is, again, personally, I would like a 2-year extension. That's my view. I know that the representatives from the city of Rye here do not have the authority to do that, but I think that the compromise that Commissioner Rosenberg has put forward is a good compromise, because I think in the end, it'll end up to be a 2-year extension. And I think that all parties will be winners, because Mr. Ambrose will have his business operating, and there's nothing that stops him from being a proposer for a long-term lease in the future. Laura?
I do want to compliment Commissioner Rosenberg on this solution, because I think it does, in fact, address the concerns that some have expressed that this process may take 2 years. And it also addresses the concern of others that, if we can get an RFP out and get proposals back for 2018, that's better for the community. It's better to have
Thank you.
that planning. So I really think that this was creative thinking. I think there's a benefit to Mr. Ambrose in moving forward with this suggested proposal, because if he only gets a 1-year lease, he gets it at a discount, and that's something that's hard to negotiate for. It's hard to get a discount going forward. So I really do appreciate the creative thinking on this. I think it really does solve the problems that the commission has suggested may be a problem with getting somebody in a year. For the city of Rye's part, I think we've heard, and I was at a meeting a couple months ago where I heard a lot of community residents expressing that they wanted an RFP. They wanted an RFP for the next season, and it's very hard for us to ignore those pleas. If we go through this RFP process and it turns out that we can't get anybody in 2018 and 2019 is a more realistic proposition, this sort of protects that. And I think it's a really good solution, and I hope that the applicant, I hope Mr. Ambrose will accept this. But we can't make him.
Nope.
We can't make him do anything. So it's really going to be in his hands at this point.
I agree with Ms. Breton. I have a question as far as the RFP goes. Knowing that the state legislature is in session from January till about April, when the budget comes out, has anyone spoken to our representatives
I
and
have.
discussed? Okay.
I have.
Because,
have.
It seems like while we're waiting for this legislation, the likelihood of it.
Well, what we need, Lindsay, is we need a home rule measure from each of the city of Rye and the town of Rye. And we would have to work on that. I've spoken to Assemblyman Otis, and he can actually pre-file a bill. So when the city and the town are ready to prepare a home rule message, we're ready to have it done. And Assemblyman Otis is confident that we could get it done by the end of session. Nothing's going to happen before the budget gets done. But at the end of session, he's confident that we could get it done. But again, you're dealing with the state legislature.
Yes.
So nothing is certain until it is certain and signed by the governor. And that may not happen, realistically, it may not happen in 2017. It may happen in 2018.
Well, that's what I was.
So that's the point.
To your point, we had our hotel tax bill pass the legislature in June, and the governor signed it in late August, early September.
Yeah. And having worked in the assembly for 2 years, I was just trying to gauge the timeline and paint a more realistic portrait of when an RFP, if we're waiting for the home rule request to come out.
In the words of the late Gilda Radner, you never know.
Yes.
I will say that I serve on both the Recreation Commission in Rye and the Rye Golf Club Commission. And so in those two roles, I have, sort of input in this exact situation. Over at our Little League park, the Little League wanted to raise money by putting up signs in the outfield wall, like you see in a lot of Little League ballparks around. It's kind of an Americana thing, Joe's plumber donates, to the Little League, and he puts up a sign in the outfield. But we needed home rule legislation to do that because, that's technically an alienation of parkland. So we contacted Assemblyman Otis, and he got that home rule legislation passed for us in under 6 months. And I know we perhaps weren't complicated by the budget, so that I could see how that could cause us a delay, but I would think he could get that done
That's
by
very,
May or June.
Terry, it's very possible. There is one complicating factor in legislation dealing with parks and licenses, and that is that very often the governor's office, when faced with a bill such as this, would prefer a bill of statewide application. For example, why just Rye Town Park? Maybe it should apply to all parks. So there is that possible complicating factor that, in fact, I think that's what happened with the general hotel tax legislation.
Yeah, it
through-
happened actually with the hotel tax recently for a number of Westchester
Right,
municipalities.
the governor,
Also
the
for,
governor vetoed it because
Peace
it was.
officers, we put in a home rule for something, they don't like the governor would prefer not to hardwire the list of municipalities
Right,
where a
that
law
sometimes
applies
they,
to and
sometimes they
others.
want to do it of statewide application.
Well,
So
the
that-
enacting legislation on this park is really, really unusual. There aren't that many parks statewide that are run by 4 municipalities because it was
Well,
formerly owned by one. So I think that's less of a risk for this kind of legislation than it is for something like a hotel tax that has more
Yeah,
statewide
but
impact.
what we're talking about is not who owns the park, but the fact that the park has an amenity that is a commercial amenity to the park. There may be other parks like that, so they may.
Well,
I'm just saying
It's
that
out
it
of
may
our
not be.
control anyway.
It's not in our control.
That's right.
And getting back again to the resolution at hand, I think that this is an excellent compromise, and it accomplishes a lot of purposes, both for the commission and I think for Mr. Ambrose. And unless there are further comments.
Yeah, real quick, Mr. Supervisor, so I just want to make sure I understand, and for the public's edification too. So we're talking about a one-year extension with no rent increase, so whatever the
That is
current level is
correct.
this year. And then if it goes into the second year, is there a rent increase or it's the same price?
I think that we have to negotiate that.
I mean, if it's the same, it sounds like a really good deal, right? And the hedge on giving back the 25%, that sounds like it's a really good deal. Recognizing the situation that we're in and don't have an opportunity to make it a different competitive arrangement. And in the interest, in being good partners with the city of Rye and with Mr. Ambrose, I think this sounds like a win-win approach.
Terry?
Yeah,
Hope it works.
I wasn't finished with my prior comments, but it's not anything terribly important. What I was going to say is, so I think there's a chance that Assemblyman Otis could get the home rule legislation done for us, in April or May. I'm not so sure that we need to have that before we do the RFP, but I appreciate the point. But even so, if that was our timeline, we did this exact same thing at the Rye Golf Club, with consultants, with a 3-month lag time to get plenty of RFP submissions in, and interviewed them all and selected them inside of 6 months, so 5-6 months. So I think it is doable in 2017, based on the experience that we had over there. I also agree that this is a good, fair solution. It's likely going to result in a 2-year lease. So I think, that's what we would get if we did pass this resolution.
Thank you.
And no
Further-
capital investment, right, required? So just
No
go
capital
in, turn on the
investment
lights, hire staff, pay rent, buy food, make money. Cool.
Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Acting Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Pillow,
Yes?
Commissioner Rosenberg,
Yes.
Acting Commissioner Brett,
Yes.
Acting Commissioner McCartney,
Yes.
President Zuckerman.
Yes. Thank you. That's it. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have,
I didn't say that too fast, did I?
wait, before you
No,
do
sorry.
that, I think Mr. Ambrose wants to say something.
Well, I have to start off by saying, being a veteran of 9 New York City marathons, I feel like I'm on the 113th mile in these negotiations. And for a guy who's a little on in years from when he did run the marathon, I need some Gatorade. But that being said, you know, let me bring people back to when we embarked upon this journey, when we inherited a park and a semblance of a restaurant which was overrun with bikers and very thirsty collegians. We inherited a building that did not even have a restroom. The women went to the bathhouse up the hill, and the men went on the tree outside the bar. And that's the reality of the situation. And anyhow, what did we do? We turned it into a fuddy-duddy family restaurant. And anyhow, it's been that way for 17 years, where we've attracted wonderful, wonderful people from all the different towns that love the place and continue to love the place. You know, I can't tell you, you know, I know to a certain extent you've been inundated with emails or calls, et cetera, and I've seen comments in the newspapers, and, you know, we have a heck of a lot of support out there. Do we have our detractors? Apparently so. But you know what? That's why Seaside Johnny's is not the only restaurant in town or in the surrounding towns. You know, different tastes for different people. You know, I'm not, you know, do I expect everybody to love Seaside Johnny's? No. But, you know, the vast majority of the people do. And, you know, I've been playing this through my head for weeks, restless at times at night, because I wanted this to come to closure one way or another. And anyhow, in as much as I understand what you're pointing at of doing the 1 plus the 1, at this point in time, after 17 years, I don't want to deal with a gray area. And anyhow, my partner and I stand united that and I think it's totally logical that we get to 2 years. We don't want to be a lame duck and a half. And that's our stance. And ultimately, we want closure to this resolution. And so please let us know at your earliest convenience. And thank you very much. And behind me, I'm gratified that we have some nice support. And if you'd like to hear some comments from people back here, I'd encourage you to open up that dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Ambrose. Does if anybody would like to speak, please approach the microphone. State your name and address, please.
Andrew Civarelli, White Plains, New York. I've known John for 20 years. I worked for him in college, put myself through college working for him. He likes to believe he put me through college, but anyway. He's been one of the finest human beings I've ever met in my life. There's another gentleman that's worked with John for 40 years. His name's Mike Satilli. You mentioned you walk your dog every day? I bet you he came out and gave your dog a bone at least once. I bet you he did, because that's how it is there. We're like a family. 17 years, you offer him a 1-year lease? That's a slap in the face. You guys should be ashamed of yourselves.
My name is Sue Geeson. I live in Rhinebeck, New York. I was actually the first waitress ever hired by John Ambrose 40 years ago when he opened the Crab Shanty in Rye. At that time, I was a freshman in Iona College, living at home, but trying to pay my way through school. I did it at the Crab Shanty, working there at nights and on the weekends, and living at home. Years later, when I married, I ended up by coincidence buying my first house down the street from the Crab Shanty. As my 2 boys went through the Rhinebeck school system and the Crab Shanty eventually closed and Seaside Johnny's opened, I became aware of how much John Ambrose actually supported the community by donating his time and effort and energy to whatever the community needed. Now, 40 years later, it has come full circle. My oldest son worked for John this past summer at Seaside Johnny's as a part-time bartender, in addition to working at his full-time job as an athletic trainer, so that he too could save money to pay for graduate school. And my 16-year-old nephew was hired as a food runner, and I couldn't be prouder. John has offered jobs to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not more, of our local residents for the past 40 years, both young and the not so young in the community. Whether it was a student saving money for school or a middle-aged person who recently lost a job, John has always been there for them. And talk about planting roots in the community, I can't think of any other restaurant group that has been so loyal to their community or created such a following for so many years. But when you have employees such as Mike Satilli, who has been employed as their #1 bartender since day one over 40 years ago, and who still goes to work each day at Seaside Johnny's determined to make sure every patron has a great experience, you can understand why customers return season after season to be with the people they have come to know so well. So besides Seaside Johnny's being a perfect seasonal place to dine outdoors during the warm weather or to relax and watch the sunset, it has also become part of the fabric of this community. Everyone knows the employees and everyone feels welcome there. And I truly hope Seaside Johnny's continues to be a part of our community for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
President Zuckerman and Commission. My name is Rose Gross Marino, and I know John for about 40 years myself. Even when we were first coming to Larchmont, and we used to eat in the city all the time because, you know, they didn't have the great restaurants up here, we found the Crab Shanty. I think what's very disconcerting is finding out that a restaurant that's on the water and has a lovely ambiance, and it has a nice clientele, welcomes children, adults, invalids, it doesn't matter, they're all welcomed. I think it's tragic that something that has been built up and encompassed the whole community and other communities, and there's much charity going on as far as Mr. Ambrose is concerned. And I've seen it for the last 35 years. And I just think that some consideration should be given to someone who has so many of the employees that started with him in the 70s. I mean, that speaks volumes. I don't understand, and it's not my business why there wants to be a change, but I think in all reality, in my world, if something isn't broken, then you don't fix it, unless there's something that I don't know, and as I said, it's not my business. But I am concerned about losing something that I so enjoy. Sitting outside, looking at the moon, having dinner. Seafood is what's hand in hand for sitting at the ocean, at the beach, at the harbor. And I sometimes have to wait in line a long time just to get up there and sit down, and it's worth it. And trust me, at this age, it's not so easy to stand a long time. But in any event, I think that for someone who has built roots and given to the community and has hired so many locals, I think it's kind of, not, I don't even want to use the word unfair, but it's kind of puzzling why this comes to a stop and another train is going to pull in. And I think that that's what hurts me the most, is I know that it has him pained. And I look back, I haven't seen some of these people since the 70s. And if that doesn't speak volumes, I have nothing else to say, but I really wish consideration goes to Mr. Ambrose and I think it's Charnon. And I thank you for listening to me. And Mr. Zuckerman, I did send you an email that reflected all this. And
Thank you.
I was awkward about doing that because I'm more of a yenta. So,
And your email was forwarded to the entire commission.
well, thank you very much. And thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Zuckerman?
Yes,
Can I
John.
just want to respond with one comment, actually. I think it's important for everyone to understand that since the days of the Romans, parkland has been for everybody's equal use. And the laws, actually, the burden of proof that you're innocent until proven guilty, when you mess with the park, our system of justice is such that the burden is inverted. You're assumed to be guilty and have to prove yourself innocent in certain circumstances when you do projects on a park, because parks are priceless. They're considered in the eyes of the law. They're more important, believe it or not, than schools and hospitals in the eyes of the law, because when you talk about the general welfare, if you draw concentric circles around the park, like Central Park, and you look at property values, that's what general welfare is all about. But in any case, so granting a 10-year contract on a park is pretty much illegal, right, Mr. Noto? And because we recognize that in a public-private partnership, we want to create an environment where a business entrepreneur, like Mr. Ambrose did many years ago, came in and put capital investment. He made a significant investment, as he described, not only in the building that is his restaurant that he leased, but also in the pavilions, and that was a great benefit to our entire community, right? And it was because of that benefit and to allow the time for him to get a return on that investment that we obtained this special legislation. But it was because of this primacy that parkland is for everybody's equal enjoyment that we need the legislation. Otherwise, we're only limited to giving revocable leases on a park. And nobody's
Licenses.
going to want to make millions of dollars of capital investment.
Then it's
Licenses.
licenses, not
I'm
lease.
sorry, licenses. Now, I knew it started with an L. Sorry. But in any case, and I know you have another meeting coming, but I just wanted the public to understand that this isn't something singling out Mr. Ambrose or anything like that, that we're obligated to get the legislation to extend the lease. And in order for it not to be an exclusive privilege, we basically have to rebid it and have to go through this cycle, which will take a bit of time. And Mr. Ambrose, as he did before, is certainly welcome to participate in the bidding process. And one more thing, nothing that we're doing here is any statement against Seaside Johnny's or Mr. Ambrose or his partners. In fact, I think his business success speaks for itself in terms of the business that he has there, the patrons that he has, right? And we give back $5 or whatever it is to everybody who comes there and pays to park and eats. $10, and we give back a lot of money, so we know it's a good business, and we want it to be a win-win situation. So it's nothing personal against John or Seaside Johnny's. It's what the law requires, and something that we're going to do diligently and expediently. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Flores.
thank you, Gary. And I echo what Dennis says. And the one thing that I would just close with is that I understand that you want a 2-year agreement. In my mind, this is going to be a 2-year agreement because this is, and I want to be hopeful that, we could turn around an RFP very quickly. I know how fast, and I understand what they did in the city of Rye with Whitby Castle, and I'm hopeful that that could happen. I'm also a realist in terms of I know how quickly things go in Rybrook and municipal government. They never go as fast as I would like them to go. And that's not a slight on our staff or anything. It's just the reality that sometimes in municipal government things take a long time. I can't see us being anything other but a 2-year agreement. Maybe it won't be, and if it's not, again, you get a nice discount off of the rent for this year. But again, the commission voted this evening, and we'll leave it for you guys to hash out.
Thanks, Paul. Again, I just want to reiterate one thing. I agree with Paul. It's going to probably end up to be a 2-year agreement. It may last longer if we don't get RFP responses that we hope to get. We didn't the last time. We're hoping to get better responses when this one goes out. But the door is not particularly closed tonight. And I would just simply request that Mr. Ambrose and his partner think this over and come back to us very shortly with a yes, because otherwise we need to take steps to winterize the restaurant, to secure the restaurant, to examine the restaurant, and in fact, possibly to show the restaurant to somebody who may want to be in there for a year. That's our obligation as a commission and my responsibility as president of the commission. So with that, do you want to speak again, Mr. Ambrose?
Well, let me start off by saying I appreciate the kind words of some people from the gallery, and I know it's heartfelt sentiment from people who have either worked with us or attended the Crab Shanty, Seaside Johnny's, the Pier Restaurant and Tiki Bar, et cetera, et cetera. And anyhow, I can sense like a leaning towards maybe 2 years. But, you know, we all know what happened in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. When the Seahawks were on the 1 yard line, they were on the precipice of winning the Super Bowl. Or you gotta break the plane, and we haven't broken the plane. And, you know, my partner and I, we're very prideful and certainly not egotistical by any way, shape, or form. But we think our body of work, we deserve 2 years. That gray area troubles us immensely. And quite frankly, a $25,000 parting gift, it really doesn't get it done. But, so I implore you to do your homework, get together, and make the decision. You know, the whole thing with the 10-year thing obviously is out the window. The whole legislation thing is not relevant. We're talking about right here, right now.
Mr. Ambrose, you're telling us to make a decision. We passed a resolution, that's the decision. The offer is there, and I would suggest that you be the one to think about it. I think it's a good offer. Most of us believe that it is in fact a 2-year offer. You know, sometimes one can have pride, and I understand that you do, and I also understand that representatives from the city of Rye have pride as well, and they've taken a stand. And Mr. Rosenberg has offered a compromise that I think is a good compromise. I'll be the first one to say, there are people who stood up at that podium while this discussion has been going on for the last several months, have been totally out of line, have insulted you when they needed not to do such a thing, and that was wrong. But nevertheless, we're talking about a business transaction. And I think, you know, first of all, I've stated where I've stood from the very beginning. And I think this offer on the table is a good offer for the commission. I think it's a good offer for you. And I think you get what you need out of it in terms of the 2 years, because frankly, it's unlikely, in my mind, may not in the minds of others, but unlikely in my mind, that it won't be a 2-year transaction. But this is up to you. The commission is not going to look at another resolution at this point, unless other people come forward and do so. I have put forward several resolutions. There's one on the table now, and that has been passed unanimously with the consent of the Rye City representatives and all the different representatives from Rye Town. So, I mean, I would hope that you would not give a no immediately, but at least think it over, at least overnight. And you can send me an email in the morning with your final decision. Okay? Thank you so much. We have a motion to adjourn.
About that motion to adjourn.
We had a motion to adjourn.
Who made the motion to adjourn?
So moved. All right.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.